All right, there we are, Acts 27, closing in. It's far more, I did this like I said, in 2006. And I remember breezing, I think I even said that I was going to breeze through the last fourth quarter of it, 21 through 28, whatever. Because there's really not much there. Why would God? He just decided to throw another extra 7 chapters in Acts for no reason whatsoever. But this time around, it's just really opened up. I've got a whole talk on part 3 last week was part 2 of the thing that I did in May, which was the Hellenistic advance. Then I did the death of the proselyte. And now part 3 will be something like Rome, on to Rome. But I think I get it, or I think I made a lot of progress in understanding what's going on here. So let's get into chapter 27. Lots of different colors. So we, they. All you have to do is highlight them and you can see Luke's presence in the narrative, almost in an arbitrary sense. He transitions back and forth between we did something and then they did something. So I find that interesting. You have to do that, yeah. That's interesting. They don't have a way of doing all the we words at one time, so you have to kind of walk through and then you do a search to see if you got them all. But blue is always the stuff that I want to remember to talk about. So right here, it kind of looks like I don't have a lot to talk about, but I did. All right. Where were we? 39 or so? 30. Okay. All right. So we're on this map here. We're always on a map in Acts. We're always on a map all the time because it's a history of redemption. This is the trip to Rome. The decision, Paul was planning on going to Rome anyway. He wrote the book of Romans probably, let's call it 2 to 3 years prior. He wrote the book of Romans probably at the end of his 3-year stay in Ephesus, right here. After that, he went to Macedonia and Achaia, and he stayed 3 months, probably in Corinth, and that's probably where he wrote the book of Romans. And so that would have been 56 or 7. It's now the winter of 59. So 3 years, he wrote Romans 2 to 3 years earlier, introducing himself to the church in Rome in anticipation of him going to Rome. So you wonder then, what is his reception going to be in Rome when he gets there? So we'll talk about that. But anyway, it's not a straight line, is it? Even his trip to Rome, just looking at the map, and this right here, of course, this part of the trip is just all over the place. This is where the lost at sea part happens, and then they end up on the island of Malta, which is where we're going to find ourselves right now. So after all that, they don't end up in the sandbars of the quicksand of Syrtis, or what we call the Gulf of Sidra, by Libya. They end up far north of that in Malta, not knowing where they are. So the providence of God, as it turns out, they didn't lose any time. I mean, that's interesting. I'm just thinking of this now. That's very interesting, because you'd think that getting lost at sea would cost them time, but it didn't. They made their way exactly like they would have from Crete to Malta, a little wandering probably. This is all guesswork. But basically they made their trip to Malta, where they were going to they were going to winter in Phoenix. Instead, they're going to winter in Malta. And you'll notice the proximity of Sicily. And then Italy is right there. So this is only this far away when they get there, when they get to Malta. So no time was lost. God knew what he was doing the whole time. Paul knew that. Sailors didn't. All right, so they're at night, they hear the breakers, they can hear the land near. It's terrifying. It's what you've both been waiting for and dreading at the same time. You need the land, but you really want the land during the day, so you can see it. They get the land at night. Now they have to slow drag it using these anchors to try to keep from hitting the rocks. So that's what they've done all night. No, they're using the anchors to slow themselves down. Yeah. So I don't know how long these ropes are. The water here is 120 feet. I said last week, in a lot of the area across which they were going, it was anywhere from 200 to 1,200 feet. So, you can drop the anchor. You don't know how deep, maybe they do know how deep it is. How do you do a sounding? How deep can you do a sounding? I don't know how they did that sort of thing to tell how deep you are. So. Yeah, do you have one that's 1,200 feet long? You do? You guessing or? No, I'm asking if that's actually what they had. And I don't know how deep they could go with the soundings, because eventually you just run out of rope. 1,200 feet of rope that's a big rope. So they eat what they can, and then they throw everything else overboard. So the cargo's a loss. The ship arrives to take them to Malta, and then it disappears again, in a sense, literally into the ocean, because they're just going to leave it there. They pick the ship up in Crete, and then or not Crete, but that other place. They pick the ship up in right here, I think, or no, Myra. They pick it up in Myra, and then it does its job. It gets them to Malta, and then another grain ship is going to take them into Italy. Okay, so then I throw everything overboard, lighten the ship as much as possible, get it out of the water. Why would you want to get it out of the water? There would be more than one reason. As much as possible. Why'd you want to make the ship as light as possible? You want to ram this thing as far up the beach as you can. So, and you don't want to run into something. So, underneath the water, it's doing these rocks and stuff. So get out of the water. The carrier's draft, I think the carrier's draft is 90,000 tons, aircraft carrier. So 90,000 tons of water displaced. You don't want to get that thing out of the water so much. Yeah. Or hopefully it wouldn't fall apart. It wouldn't just run into something and start breaking. It just would break apart. Okay, 39. When day came, finally, they could not recognize the land, but they did observe a bay with a beach, and they resolved to drive the ship onto it if they could. They. There's no more we's in this section. Casting off the anchors, they left them in the sea, while at the same time they were loosening the ropes of the rudders. Look at the detail he's throwing out here. This is the divinely inspired word of God. Who cares about ropes and anchors? So if you ask, why are we talking about this? My answer is because it's there. It was bothered to be put in there as if it mattered. So, we're going to talk about it. Hoisting the foresail to the wind, they were heading for the beach. It's a sense of anticipation as he unwinds this graphic visual presentation. You can see the sailors doing this stuff. Luke is presenting it. It's very graphic. It's been the whole way. It's one of the most graphic sections of the Bible. The whole sea voyage of Paul. In this case, he didn't do that in the other ones, but he did it in this one. Striking a reef where two seas met, they ran the vessel aground and the prow. I would assume that's the pointy thing. I should have looked that up. Stuck fast and remained immovable, but the stern began to be broken up by the force of the wave. So they're stuck. Now the back, so the front is lodged in and the back is just bouncing on, with the waves and so forth. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners so that none would swim away and escape. Where are they going to swim to? The centurion, wanting to bring Paul safely through, there's that Roman popping in to save Paul, kept them from their intention and commanded that those who could swim should jump overboard first and get to land. So the centurion's taken charge. That's why these guys are centurions. Very level-headed, grace under pressure, very smart. Is very important. They were the backbone of the military. So you get a very clear picture of that. Little insight into the way the Roman centurions were in the Roman Empire. I don't think he was unusual. The rest should follow someone. It's almost like he's reporting the orders that the centurion gave. This is what I want. I want those of you who can to jump overboard and swim for it and get to land. But the rest, if you can't swim, I want you to get on planks or any of the other various things on the ship. You can almost see him having listened to to the centurion give the orders. Now everybody does it. Now he's recording it. He's chronicling it. He just goes back and repeats the orders that the centurion gave. He did remember. That's right. So it happened that they were all brought safely to land. And there's an important word that I didn't even highlight, and it's this word right here. It fulfills. Keep up your courage. This is Paul speaking about a vision. God has granted to you, all those who are sailing with you. So all were brought safely to land. So there's this divine providence hanging over the entire voyage. They don't care about the wheat, including the people that wanted to kill the prisoners. So now they're going to spend 3 months together on this island. Talk about that in a minute. So a lot of suspense here. We don't even yet know. Luke is holding back even the name of the island so far. So now we turn the page. I don't even know that I have much more to say about this. Yeah, I do. Of course, I always have more to say. It's a miracle the ship held together long enough for all the men to get it safely off. That's a miracle too. It's a miracle that they made it across to Malta. It's an island. I mean, look at this. Look at this island. It's this little dot of land. It's this little dot of land. I like this map a little bit. This is all guesswork about where their actual, how would they know that they turn north a little bit right here? But it does make the point that it's this chaotic, just wobbly journey, drifting to and fro, not knowing where they're going. And they end up finding this little dinky dot of land that's 500 miles away. It's just got divine providence written all over it. It's exactly this. It's a port call. And we're going to find out that there's been another Alexandrian grain ship that's wintering there. So from the vantage point of God, God is just saying, okay, they're going to go ahead and take a grain ship to Malta, and then they'll pick up another grain ship and go to Italy. They just doesn't mention the fact of what's going to happen in between. But it's a port that these ships landed in, which is they're in that ship. They're in an Alexandrian grain ship, and they end up at the port where Alexandrian grain ships land. So and winter. I mean, so they wanted to winter in Phoenix, right? Because it was suitable for wintering. Well, so is Malta. So God is overruling Phoenix. No, you're not going to winter in Phoenix. I got a better port for you. You're going to winter in Malta because there's going to be an Alexandrian grain ship in Malta that you're going to be able to take to Italy. And that's what's going on in the divine narrative. You just have to step back, and it's just all on the map. Fascinating. If you're geeky about this stuff, it's fascinating. If you're not, it's boring. So once again, Roman authorities step in. How many times has this happened? Pilate wanted to release Jesus. Herod wanted to release Jesus. Pilate again wanted to release Jesus. We get the threefold. What evil has he done thing? I find no evil in this man. So that was the story of Jesus by the Romans. You got the Roman centurion at the cross says what? Truly, this man was innocent in Luke. So you have a Roman declaring Jesus' innocence of the crimes levied against him. Now you get into Acts. You have Paul at Corinth, which is the seat of authority for the province of Achaia. Right here. So how come Corinth isn't on this map? That's weird. Corinth is like right here. That's really weird. Why would they put Sparta on this map and not Corinth? They don't put Philippi either. Anyway, so he why did I say all this? Yeah, remember Gallio, the proconsul of Achaia, declared Paul innocent when the Jews dragged him before the magistrates, whatever you call that, whatever the judgment seat. Then you had when he gets back to Jerusalem, you have the tribune saving him. Then you have the Roman centurion. So the tribune is a Roman. The Roman centurion, Paul says, hey, can you take this young man to the tribune? He's got something to tell the tribune. So that's Paul's nephew about the plot. So the centurion does that, very saving Paul. Oh, actually, before that, it was the centurion. Paul notified the centurion that he's a Roman when he's about to be flogged, scourged. And the centurion is the one who goes to the tribune and says, what are you about to do? This man's a Roman. And everybody backs off. So then Claudius Lysias, the tribune, sends him to Caesarea.
Her feet all wet.
Hey, Dan.
Come on. Go. Come
Hey,
on.
Dan, can you mute?
Go on. Come on. Evie.
Maybe I can mute.
Go.
It's dog problems. That's funny. I don't have a dog, so I don't know what that's like. My hunch is a lot of yelling preceded that at the disobedient dog. I do that with the help desk, or I don't. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, so Claudius Lysias, the Roman tribune, sends him to Caesarea to save him from the Jews. Felix won't find him guilty, the Roman governor. Festus won't find him guilty, the second Roman governor. Agrippa won't find him guilty, declares him innocent, the king of Galilee and some other places. Now they're sending him to Rome. And now on the way, this Roman centurion saves Paul from his own soldiers who want to kill him. So it's this consistent theme throughout the entire narrative of Luke Acts about the Romans. And why, I don't know, but possibly because Luke was a Roman. Maybe. He's writing to a Roman, certainly. Most excellent Theophilus. So he portrays, in true fashion to the story, he portrays the Romans as, he portrays Christianity and its messengers as no threat to the empire. And I think that's part of the apologetic point of the book of Acts, is that the Roman Empire held nothing against Christianity and the spread of Christianity. So that's that. It's enough on that. Now, hanging over this story as well is another famous story of a shipwreck, a lost at sea incident in the Old Testament. What's that one? Jonah. We haven't even mentioned it yet. So if you know your Old Testament, you've sort of got Jonah tracking in your head. Only in the case of Jonah, it's more the contrast between the two stories that are interesting, not the comparisons, because Jonah was running away. Paul has been told, you're going to get on a boat and go to Rome. Jonah's been told, you're going to go to Nineveh. And Jonah says, I'm not doing that. So he goes out to sea to avoid it. And he ends up getting swallowed and then spit out. So when Paul, when all these people go into the sea, you got to wonder, if you know the story of Jonah, you got to wonder what's going to happen. And so you're kind of watching this, because he's going to get eaten by a fish and then spit out on the land or something. No, he's just going to walk up onto the land. Oh, okay. Oh, we got to wonder if Paul was thinking that. Well, here we go. After all this, am I going to take a little journey inside the belly of a whale like Jonah? Is he going to make another parallel between me and a prophet by, you get in the water or whatever, and you start looking around it, I mean, just think about being in that water. Mediterranean is ocean, essentially. So, you get dumped into the sea and that's big waves. It's night, you can't see anything. So you're just wondering what's going to happen. You don't know. God hasn't, it's common with God. He will, maybe with these people, he tells them what they're going to do, but he doesn't tell them how they're going to get there. So he tells Peter, you're going to Caesarea, but he doesn't tell Peter that he's going to go to Caesarea to preach the gospel for the first time. He's going to preach the gospel to an unclean Gentile, uncircumcised Gentile, who will receive the Holy Spirit for the first time in Acts, in the history of redemption, a Gentile receiving the Holy Spirit. So that was not a part of the story of the Ethiopian eunuch. He just, Philip preached the gospel to him, And he believed and became baptized, but there's no mention of the Holy Spirit. So in Acts, there's a pouring of the Holy Spirit on the Jews at Pentecost. There's one on the Samaritans in Acts 8. Peter and John lay hands on them. And then the third one is the outpouring of the Spirit on Cornelius and his family and whoever in Acts 10. And then there's going to be another one in Ephesus on these pagans. So Cornelius was a God-fearer. And then finally, there's a pagan outpouring as well at Ephesus. So that's beyond the scope. So let's move. And I'm rehearsing what I talked about last week, which I didn't mean to put in there either, but I started talking about it, couldn't stop. That's what added 2 minutes to it. It was 5 minutes over. You start talking about like I'm doing right now. You start talking about something that's not in the script. Just check, it's 5 minutes. That's it. So if you do that 3 times, you've added 15 minutes to what you were going to say. All right. So anyway, just be aware of Jonah. The differences are more acute than the similarities. That's 27. And boy, is it happening fast now. The narrative has picked up speed since they left Caesarea. At the beginning of this chapter, where were they? Think about that. At the beginning of this chapter, they were still in Caesarea. They had just left Herod and Festus, the testimony before Herod and Festus. And now, one chapter later, 44 verses, they're on Malta. And then in another 31 verses, the book ends. So he's only going to spend 11 verse 12 to something like 18 verses on Rome. After all that, he's only going to talk about what goes on in Rome for 18 verses or something like that. So there's something you can learn just by the amount of narrative. He spends far more on the shipwreck than he does on what actually happened in Rome. It's the weirdest thing. All right, so we turn the corner now. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. We know this. We know this. He's with Paul when he gets to Rome. He's either with Paul, the we sections, there they are. This is why I highlight stuff like this. You'd see that there's no more we sections after this. So this is when he, yeah, so he enters Rome with Paul, and then he disappears. He disappears himself from the narrative. In fact, he disappears all the Christians from the narrative except for Paul himself. You would think, having finally gotten Paul to Rome, that we would hear stories about Paul preaching the gospel to the untold thousands and, you know, all kinds of conversions. None of that's going to happen. Okay, 1 through 6. When they had been brought safely through, not us, not we found out that the island was called Malta or Melita. If you prefer, I read that it's a Canaanite. It's a Canaanite word that means refuge. So refuge, which would be a good reason to point it out if you're Luke, and you just let the audience get the double meaning. The natives, we'll go back and look at that. The natives showed us extraordinary kindness, for because of the rain that had set in and because of the cold, I don't know why I highlighted the cold, they kindled a fire and received us all, us. There's that all again right there. All. Prisoners alike. They know they're prisoners. They received all of us, including the prisoners. When Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, a viper came out because of the heat and fastened itself on his hand. So it's cold out. So you got snakes, reptiles. In the cold, they get frigid. There's a snake in this pile of wood. So he unwittingly takes the snake over to the fire to warm up. The snake warms up and it's ticked off. Not grateful at all. There's no gratefulness on his part. On the snake's part. Oh, wow, man, thanks. I don't know who you are, but I appreciate you warming me up like these. Just immediately lashes out. And by fastened right here, I think Luke means with fangs. He's got a hold of them. When the natives saw the creature hanging from his hand, they began to say to one another, undoubtedly this man is a murderer, and though he had been saved from the sea, he has been saved from the sea. Justice has not allowed him to live. Justice there would be a god. A deity of some kind, probably. Yes, they just, yeah, they didn't have any of this innocent until proven guilty thing. The Romans had that for Romans. If the Roman wanted it. But the rest of the world, nope. However, he shook the creature off into the fire. Paul gets even, right? Karma. Oh, you're not going to be grateful for me warming you up. I'm going to throw you in the fire. You can get all the heat you want. Suffered no harm, but they were expecting that he was about to swell up. It's so graphic. It was like a video's running. I mean, who really cares about these details? But he's narrating the whole thing like he was amazed when it happened, like he's watching this and he wants the audience to enter into this extraordinary event of this snake hanging from Paul's hand. It's providence again, just like the shipwreck, just like being saved from when Paul talks about being brought safely through in 2 Corinthians, he's gone through all of these trials and tribulations. It just continued to the bitter end, all the way through the shipwreck. You could say, is Paul cursed or is he blessed? It's almost like first he's cursed and then he's blessed with the lifting of the curse, huh? Yeah, there's not, yeah. Yeah, after all that, now he's got a snake hanging from, oh man. They were expecting to swell up, but suddenly fall down dead. But after they had waited a long time and had seen nothing, so they think he's a murderer in one sense. Waited a long time and seen nothing unusual happen to him. They changed their minds and began to say that he was a god. So this picture of the fickle pagan, just flipping back and forth from murderer to a god. That happened previously, the other way around. Does anybody remember that? Among the pagans. Yeah, Lystra in Galatia. Yeah, Paul healed the lame man. So they wanted to sacrifice. The priest of Zeus came out. They called Barnabas Zeus and Paul Hermes. And they were going to offer sacrifices to these two. And they were doing this, and they were speaking in the native language of Lystra. So Paul didn't understand them. But when they realized what was happening, they put two and two together. They lunged into the situation and begged them not to do it. So they didn't offer sacrifices for Paul and Barnabas. But then so that's in one sense. And then here come the Jews from sitting in Antioch who won the crowd over. So they stoned Paul instead. And they left him for dead outside the city. And that's when he gets back up and he walks back in. So amazing stories. A little insight into the pagan world here. All the events that happen have divine ramifications to them, right? That's how they think, and to a certain extent we do too. It's just, I don't know how you decide for sure that what is what. You keep reading so to speak, reading the tea leaves. God is doing X, Y, or Z based on the events that happen. We're terrible as humans at that. Anticipating what it is that God is doing. All you can do is turn on and look backwards and say, well, this happened, which is very convenient because it accomplished these things. And you can see it, you can connect dots there and see a pattern. That's exactly the way the New Testament writers, participants were. Peter did not have his eyes open about the nations being welcomed in until he was standing at the door of Cornelius, actually in his house, preaching the gospel. That's when he realized it. Not before. It's not like when he had the vision of the sheets coming down 3 times with the unclean animals in them. Arise, Peter, kill and eat. That he didn't want to do. You would think, oh, okay, I get it. He was halfway there. When Cornelius comes before him, he falls prostrate before Peter. Very strange behavior for a Roman centurion. Peter says, no, you need to get up. I'm just a man like you are. And he says, that it's on how unlawful it is for a Jew to enter the house of a Gentile and a foreigner, or even visit him. And I forgot why I was going to say. Oh yeah. So he continues on, and anybody remember what he said next? Peter? Oh, you're so close, Peter. But God has told me not to call any man unclean. So he picked up the message about the clean thing in the vision, that it didn't just apply to animals, that it applied to humans. But he could not take the next step to the idea that that meant that the Gentiles could enter into the church as uncircumcised Gentiles. He could not get there. That had to actually happen in front of his eyes before he would get there. So, you know, if they can't figure it out beforehand, and they couldn't figure out that Jesus' death atoned for sins beforehand, what chance do we have? So just be humble about what you think you know about what God is doing. Or might do, or will do. Malta was a standard port of call and haven for wintering, but here's the, you know, so they didn't recognize it, right? The sailors said, we don't recognize this place where we're at. Here's the reason for that. Here's Malta. They are up here, that's best guess, in a place that is now named St. Paul's Bay, which we'll look at in a minute. It's not going to be identified. It remains unknown in the story, but this would be the place where wintering would happen normally. So the grain ship is probably over here. So that centurion during the winter, he's heading down the coast to figure out what's going on with the ships that are in port for the winter so that he can get to Italy. But he's not going to do it from, probably not going to do it from St. Paul's Bay. This, you know, maybe this is where all the Greek speakers are. He's not going to find him here. We'll get back to that in a second. These are going to be natives, not the Greek speakers. So anyway, that's Malta. Whoops. Yeah. Yeah. So let's look at a couple of images here because I like images. Let's see what we got here. Malta. St. Paul's Bay. Got several pictures of St. Paul's Bay. I don't know why they're not showing up. What's going on here? Huh. Open with. Open with. Huh. I guess we'll just use paint. Nope. Well, anyway, that's good enough. Can you make this bigger? Well, anyway, you can get the point. It's this, you can see where they say in a place where the two seas met, and you can kind of see it here with this funnel thing. Well, they're not, their ship is shipwrecked and breaking apart at sea. So, oh, wait a minute. I already got it open. What am I doing? There it is. There it is. Yeah, this is a modern. Some of this doesn't make sense, but you know, you got but you get a sense of the two seas coming together that he's talking about, which mean currents, lots of currents. And then here's Valletta now. A lot of history, man. Yeah, they do. Lots of history. Look at this. No, thank you. Man, you're just really opening yourself to violent storms, you know? How come there? What's going on over there? Can somebody close that door? Thank you. So that's St. Paul's Bay. Named so because of the events, of course, it's anachronistic. What else have I got? So let's go ahead and. So that's Malta. Never been there. Seen it a lot on radar. Got in trouble once there for something I did in the air. Had to go talk to the admiral. That was unpleasant. But that's another story. Which is really odd because I was very proud of myself for what I did when I landed. They were not proud on the ship. Tell that story sometime. Yeah, it's back in the Soviet days. Let's see here. So let's go. So the people of Malta, they're called natives right here, right? What do they mean by that's the word from which we get barbarian, which you can be anachronistic. In English, barbarian means savage. of some kind, uncivilized. It's not what it meant. That's not what he means by the word here. The word simply means non-Greek speaking, not a product of Greek culture, isolated from Greek culture or something like that. So probably a dialect of Phoenicia, a Phoenician dialect. So these probably descendants of Phoenicia from over where Israel was. Or actually, I think they're all sea traders, so they were all over the place. These Phoenicians were kind of like Carthaginians, I think, that everything was about sea trade for them.
It doesn't just mean people who have to be listening.
No, he means non-Greek speaking. Yeah. He never uses that word anywhere else. Does he use it on Cyprus? I don't think he even uses it there. Whoops. So if we look up natives. 2 occurrences in Acts, both of them in 28. So that brings up a great question. So we'll read the rest of this narrative. What is this story doing here? Why the detail on this story? November, cold and rain. So you're talking roughly the same latitude as Virginia, maybe, or so. 36, maybe. I don't think it's very different. Maybe a little higher than that. But it's pretty much the Straits of Gibraltar. I think Gibraltar is 36. Somebody could look that up. Norfolk, Virginia is 36. But why was I saying that? Yeah, so you drag yourself out of the water after this traumatic event. You haven't slept in weeks, basically. You haven't hardly eaten. What about water? You're terrified, you're shivering cold, and you have been. You just pull yourself up on the land, and what are you going to encounter? And they get striking how quickly it happens that they immediately receive the hospitality of the natives. That fast. So the narrative turns real quick.
35.9.
35.9? It's pretty close to 36. It's the winter season. It's November and it's November in the Med. That's why they're wintering. They can't go any farther. So Paul makes himself useful. Don't miss that. He's out gathering sticks, not sitting around. Through the snake, God demonstrates his protection over Paul because Paul has been promised that he would see Rome. So shipwrecks, snakes, natives, none of that's going to make any difference. He's going to see Rome, and he knows it. The turnabout, divine justice, whatever you want to call that God. The God, this is kind of interesting. We got to get to the twin figureheads before we can talk about that, I guess. Just a minute. So we talked about Lystra, the eerie parallel there, the other way around. First, they were done to offer sacrifices to Paul. Then they stoned him. These people were just waiting to see him fall down dead, just watching. They weren't trying to kill him. So that takes us to 7. In the neighborhood of that place, he doesn't identify it. There were lands belonging to what he calls the chief man of the island, or the first man of the island, named Publius, who welcomed us and entertained us courteously 3 days. So very positive portrayal of this guy. Roman name, Publius. So there's Romans on this island, but the people are not on this side of the island are non-Greek speaking. Whether they were on the other side where Valletta was is another story. Happened that the father of Publius, we got one more miracle in the Bible. Happened that the father, actually we got a lot of miracles in the Bible. Father of Publius was lying in bed, afflicted with fever and dysentery. You can hear the Luke the physician thing all through this part of the narrative. Paul went in to see him, and after he had prayed, he laid his hands on him and healed him. Now he's going to pay back the native. God is going to pay back the natives for their hospitality. As it happened, this is just right out of the Gospels, right? Once the word gets out on Jesus, they just keep bringing the sick and infirm to him. After this happened, the rest of the people on the island who had diseases were coming to him and getting cured. This is outpouring of divine miracles on the natives in Malta. Strange place for it to happen because it never happens in the life of Paul in Acts. None of those cities is there. He does cure a few people, but there's nothing like this in any of his travels in the Greek-speaking provinces until he gets to Malta. You know, so what do you make of that? What's odd about it is there will be no proclamation. You never hear what happens to Julius the centurion or Publius or anybody else. There's no proclamation to anybody on the ship, anybody on Malta. That's all in the past. And no hint that they received the word of God or received the gospel or anything like that. That's all left behind at this point. Luke is not. If it happened, we don't get to read about it. And remember, Paul's going to spend 3 months. They had to have known Julius pretty well by the time you get to the end of this 3 months, the Roman centurion. And Paul can talk to him because Paul's a Roman too. So, you know, and maybe Luke is. All right, so right on the life of Jesus here. They also honored us. It's really, really favorable with many marks of respect. I suppose I would be too if I ended all disease on an island. And when we were setting sail, they supplied us with all that we needed. It's just this great picture. After everything that happened to them, you know, to have this kind of reception and lodging. So what do you guys think? Would you rather have spent the winter here or in Phoenix? Because by now, everybody knows Paul's going to get them safely to Rome. They're under some kind of divine protection.
When they supplied us with all we needed, are we just talking about Paul and Luke and his group, or are we talking the 200 some people?
It's a great question. He's used us, what?
200 some men and whoever Paul is.
Yes, that's the way I would take it. Us before, we before has always been we, the whole party. It's be the same size grain ship.
They already have their own food.
Yeah, that's right. So they had 276, but those grain ships could hold more passengers than that. Some of those grain ships could hold 1,200.
Maybe some of them signed up for food.
Yeah, I don't know. Or they took another ship. Maybe there's more than one. So they set sail from Malta and it's over there.
We wouldn't necessarily mean the whole 200.
He doesn't, yeah. He honored us. They honored us with many marks of respect. Sounds like Paul's company. Not all these prisoners. Not, you know, because there would have been murderers and stuff, probably. They're shipped back to Rome for punishment. So about this chief man of the island, this was another time when, you know, unless you could get confirmation from outside of the world of the Bible, then what the Bible says happened didn't really happen. That's the way it always is. And this was a case of it. Since we have no evidence about this chief man of the island, he'd never existed until he suddenly came to exist when they found 2 inscriptions, one in Latin and one in Greek, referencing the chief man of the island. So that's what they called him on the island. He was the chief man of the island. So Luke is using their vernacular, which is typically Luke. I think that's probably why he also calls Paul Paul, because there's another Paul in Acts, the proconsul of Cyprus, who was Sergius Paulus. And Paulus is the same name that Paul has. If you look in the Greek, it's Paulus. That's Paul's name, which has been shortened in English to Paul. So my hunch is, why does he switch to Paul? It's because that's what people just called him on a day-to-day basis. Whereas the proconsul gets a more formal name. So Pax Romana, there's a Roman on the island, you know, it's safe. And a Roman's in charge, and it's Pax Romana. It's the Roman peace, prosperity, safety, security. Yeah, everybody comes through. Interesting. Talked about lots of medical records, profoundly positive portrayal of the natives of Malta. So flush the barbarian thing down the toilet. So the gospel, I'm trying to figure out why this story is here. There's lots of reasons. It takes up 10 verses. That's a lot of narrative when there's no proclamation. There's no proclamation here. Why is all this narrative devoted to what happened on Malta if there's no narrative, if there's no proclamation? You got to think about that. I'm not sure I have a good answer, except to say, just before they get to Rome, there's been a proclamation to Jews and a proclamation to the Greek-speaking Roman world. And now there's a proclamation to the non-Greek speaking world as well. It's been extended. You can just assume, even though you don't see the proclamation in the narrative, you have to assume that that happened. Paul's going to end up chained to a soldier when he gets to Rome. As many people have noted, what would it have been like as a non-believer to be chained to Paul for a whole day and know that you're going to do it again in 2 more days or something like that, you know? All right. No, it's 10:15. We got to stop. So we're verse 11. And we might actually finish this next time. And if we do, we'll talk about what's next. We might not. I don't know. I thought we would get farther today. Yeah, it's no more than 2 weeks. I want to show the Great Jewish Revolt, the 45-minute thing on what happened in AD 70, about 10 years after these events here, when Jerusalem was completely destroyed. So anyway, go ahead and shut down now. Thanks for showing up.